Welcome to Keep You 100 Radio. I'm your host, Lissie Pointer, type 1 diabetic, certified health coach, personal trainer, and founder of Needles and Spoons Health and Wellness. Inside this podcast, you'll find the real and raw conversations around diabetes management, including the lessons that we don't learn in our endo's office, my best tips and trainings, and conversations from the experts that I trust inside the community so that you can create more predictability in your diabetes management and feel empowered while doing so. Let's dive in. I love using Skin because honestly it's the only patch company that I found that actually keeps my devices on while I'm doing things that I love, like weightlifting, running with my dogs, being really active and doing the things that I didn't think I could do before with diabetes. Hello, welcome back to another episode of Keeping It 100 Radio. I am here with one of the closest people in my life. You're literally laughing at me. I'm here today with my fiancé, Jordan. I'll let you introduce yourself.
I'm Jordan. I'm Lissie's fiancé.
Oh, you're the worst. He's so excited to be here. I thought that with the week that this is being released is Valentine's Day. So romantic, right? So I figured it would be a great opportunity to come on here with you and just kind of talk about the ins and outs of, not only living with diabetes, but having that as a part of a partnership in, especially with somebody that you're with long term. So yeah, why don't you take a second and introduce yourself and share about you, what you do, who you are.
Okay. Well, my occupation is fireman. I've been a fireman for 3 years now in Jersey City. I'm also a musician. That's how we met. And so I play drums, I sing, and I fight fires.
He sings, but he hates talking in front of a microphone.
That doesnn't make me nervous. This makes me nervous.
You're doing great. Share. Do you want to share how we met? Sure.
So I was playing a gig. I think it was Halloween, right? Mm-hmm. And it was in Red Bank. And I was playing for Lissie's best friend, Taylor. It was one of my first gigs with her, actually. Mm-hmm. And I think you just came home from Florida, mm-hmm. right, from Miami. And I remember saying to my friend Nick, I was like, oh, who is that? He said, oh, that's Taylor's friend, Lissie. I was like, okay.
Shouldn't keep that in mind. Well, the kicker is I was on a Bumble date that night. So I've been pretty open about that whole year and that why I moved home from Miami, and I was not looking to really date. That was a month after I moved home, pretty much exactly a month. And the funny thing is pretty much everybody I'm surrounded by are musicians. My two best friends, my cousin, now you, Nick, our old roommate, everybody's a musician. So that particular night, it was a Thursday night, and I don't go out generally on any weekend, but specifically a weekday. And I was going out on this Bumble date, and I remember it was very spotty of whether we would actually be going or not. And I was like, you know what, screw it, I'm gonna go anyway, because even if I'm alone, I'm gonna enjoy this gig. And the part that you didn't mention is that you were wearing a blonde wig.
I was.
He was wearing, my best friend Taylor, who was the singer, is a blonde. And so for Halloween, the entire band decided to dress up as her. And so you're in this blonde wig and a jean jacket playing your cajon. And the funny thing...
That set it off, huh?
Yeah, exactly. I was like, this is the only way this is going to work, is if you wear that blonde wig for the rest of your life. But no, I actually, my Bumble date was there for maybe 45 minutes, dipped out early, and then we were talking at the end of the gig, and I thought you had a girlfriend because you were just so nice. I was just kind of standing there in the circle, listening in to all the musicians, and you're like, who's this? And Taylor's like, oh, this is my best friend Lissie, just moved home. And you're like, okay. And you were just so nice that I was like, there's no way that you're just a nice I thought you were in a relationship because you were just too friendly.
You still think I'm that nice?
Sometimes. But yeah, and then about a month later, we had kind of run into each other a few other times with Taylor. Mm-hmm. And a month later, Thanksgiving Eve, I had gone to another one of your gigs, and at this point Bumble date is out of the picture. And I had known that you were playing with her on Thanksgiving Eve, and I don't know what it was, but I was just like, that one. I was at your gig, and I lean over to my friend, and I was like, the drummer, like the drummer, like that's, I don't know what it was, but, and yeah, you want to take it away from there? see how good your memory is.
Where do you want me to pick up from?
Yeah, like what happened that night?
Yeah, so I remember, I think you said on a break, you said you and Taylor were going down to Asbury to a place, a bar or something, and you had invited me, and I wanted to go with Nick because I didn't want to go alone, and he bailed on me.
I was like, there's no way he's going to show up now. And I did it really casually to try and be like, oh yeah, you should come, but not trying to be too direct. And you showed up. You did. You hated the entire season.
You messaged me on Instagram, and I think you asked if I was going. I said, I don't think so, because Nick wasn't going. You said, oh, you should still come. So I drove down there, and I had my dad's minivan.
That was...
And I ended up having to drive all of you home, and Courtney's sister thought I was an Uber driver.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. And I was like, okay. And you had asked me on a date like before we left. So I'm like, I'm going on a date this weekend with a guy who drives.
Before you saw me driving a minivan.
Yeah. So when we met up for the date, I was thinking I was going to see you driving a minivan, but you had the truck. I'm like, whew. So the only red flag from there was the fact that you had green bubbles when I texted you, but we got past that. So that's the story. That's how we met. And yeah, now 4.5 years later, we're getting married. We've been living together for the past 2.5 years, almost 3 years in June. 3. Yeah. Wow, that flew by. Do you want to tell a story about how we got engaged?
Yeah. So we planned a 3-week road trip out west. We drove her little Ford Focus from New Jersey to Death Valley and back.
Don't know how it survived Death Valley, to be honest.
And it was really our first like major stop, the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
I decided to propose in the Grand Canyon.
Surprised you didn't like knock.
Because I think if I waited any longer, I think you would have killed me by then. So
it was about time. No, but yeah, it was very romantic. It was very sweet. But that whole hike was kind of, after that, was so miserable. Because we were on our hike down, and that hike was like very steep.
Yeah. I think we underestimated how deep the Grand Canyon goes.
Yeah. It was so steep. It was like a 6-mile hike altogether. Maybe a little bit more.
3 miles down and 3 miles back up. Well, it was more, but we didn't do the whole thing.
Yeah. If we did, you wouldn't have. You would have needed a helicopter to come get you.
I would have been airlifted.
Yeah.
And it would have been over the news.
Essentially, yeah, we get to like Point, you propose, everything's great. You propose and then say, I need a snack. Very romantic. And then essentially we make it down to like the halfway point or the main lookout, and your leg is like killing you because of how steep everything was. So we decide, head back, go back up, and the entire time you are in so much pain. Like we just booked it.
Yeah, well, we don't hike that often.
Yeah, and those shoes weren't fantastic
either. I had brand new hiking shoes.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a good idea.
Yeah, the very first hike. I'm glad that like the rest of it didn't go as chaotically, but it was a great trip. We survived. Like 2 months after we got back, that's when my car decided to kind of crap out. So we made it. We did it. But, kind of like, let's backtrack a little bit to like when we first met. Do you remember when I first told you that I had type 1 diabetes?
Well, you told me on our first date, but I don't think I really like registered it. Like, yeah. You said it and I was like, oh, okay. And I don't think I really put it together.
Right.
Until like maybe the second or third date.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay. I get it,
Yeah. We were getting breakfast. And of course, that's kind of like, I think every type 1 diabetic's worst nightmare for a first date. Because you're like, food. Like I have to, you have to carb count. You have to take your insulin. So I remember we were having a conversation. And I took out my Omnipod to like bolus. And I remember saying specifically, like, I don't want to be rude, but I have diabetes. I just need to take insulin. And you really didn't even, I don't think it even really registered with you. Because you just kind of were, okay, yeah. And you kept talking. But like, yeah, when did it kind of actually hit you that this was something that really impacted me day to day?
I don't know. I guess the more we, dated and saw each other, I think I just saw little by little, like how much energy it takes,
Yeah. Do you remember your reaction to that? Like when we first really had a conversation about it?
Yeah, I think I was a little, scared or intimidated by it because, I don't know. I don't think there was like a one moment where I was like freaking out about it.
No.
I think I just learned more and more.
Yeah, like, slowly.
Yeah.
I mean, I do remember like one specific conversation and I was like, hey, like it was after probably a few weeks at least. And I was like, hey, like I have type 1 diabetes. I also have Crohn's. And I do remember you sitting down and like maybe intimidated you on the inside, but externally, I remember you literally saying like, this doesn't scare me. And that to me, I mean, of course I know as somebody living with it, I'm like, okay, like there's so much that you can really conceptually grasp about it. But that to me at least was comforting in that you accepted it at least. Or we had a very direct conversation and like, hey, this is something.
Well, what mattered to me was that I enjoyed, being with you and spending time with you. And I didn't want that to get in the way of that. So
now 4.5 years later, you're like, oh, I don't know.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely know a lot more now about how hard it is.
Probably more than you ever really wanted to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember ever talking to like your parents about it and saying like, this is something that this person that I'm seeing is dealing with?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Do you remember their reaction?
Yeah, I don't think they, really understood exactly what type 1 means either. I mean, I know like a lot of people think, oh, diabetes, like type 2, they must be out of shape. They must be obese or, it must be because of their diet or choices that they've made. I don't think a lot of people know that you can get diabetes from the flu.
Right.
Or born with it, or just like it can just come out of nowhere.
Right. Yeah. And I'm glad that you say that too, because I mean, like I've had experiences in the past where like I dated somebody in college and when they called their parents to tell them about me, they mentioned type 1 and the parent or their dad's reaction was, are you sure you want to deal with that? And like to me it's a filtering process of like, okay, if the person that you're seeing can't deal with it, their parents or family, whoever, that's just more for me to know that that's not going to be the person.
No, my parents never said that.
Yeah.
No, it's just, I mean, it's something that you have to think about. Like there's a lot of, I don't want to say not extra responsibility, but extra, that's just more things that you have to consider.
Yeah, and it is, because even coming here, for example, we're in the studio right now, leaving to come here, you, for example, you have to like eat your meal, grab your jacket, grab your keys, wallet, we can head out. For me, it's like, okay, make sure that I have my extra juice box, my PDM, where are my blood sugars at? Did I eat lunch before? Like there's so many extra thoughts that go into one decision or action that I don't think people realize until you're really in it. And sometimes I think that even us in a relationship, that unless I communicate it, because I do think that you understand it, but sometimes it's easy to I don't even want to say like overlook, but it's just not part of your thought process. So sometimes for me, I have to kind of remember that I need to communicate that, because it's natural for me, but it's not going to be natural for somebody else. You, my mom, my best friends, like, and I think that's where a lot of relationships get lost in communication or lack of, because we expect, or at least I know that I've fallen into this, and like I expect you or my parents or my friends to know that this is something that I'm going through and that these are thoughts that I'm always having, but you can't have that expectation when you're living two completely different realities. So I don't know. I think that we've had that before. Had that happen.
I mean, yeah, I get that, but I try to.
Oh,
know,
yeah.
I think I try to remember sometimes.
You do. And I think it's always.
Because I try to be considerate.
Yeah.
And try to put myself in your shoes
right.
as much as I can.
Yeah.
If we're going somewhere and I see that you're, frazzled or
like today.
like today.
You're like, let me taste something.
I'll kind of like look to see if you grabbed your pump
mm-hmm.
or look to see if you have a juice box, or I'll ask you. I didn't today, but
usually you do. Do you have everything?
Or like with the road trip, I knew, we might be in the desert somewhere, not around a store where you can get a juice. So
yeah,
I was trying to remember, do we have supplies that we need just in case?
Right. Yeah. No, you always do. And it's always like, as soon as I say something one time, you never forget after that, which I always appreciate.
Well, maybe with the diabetes stuff, but
well, yeah, other things. We're not gonna get into that. So this was a question that was submitted to me through like Instagram. Somebody asked this.
Oh boy.
How do you deal with the quote unquote bad diabetes days as my partner?
Well, some days it's easier than others. If I'm not stressed out myself, it's not so bad, because I kind of just look and see what you need. I'll ask you what you need. Sometimes you can't tell me because let's say your sugar is high and you can't even think. I'll just, if I know your blood sugar is high, I try to make sure you rest, and if you need things to be done, I'll try to do them for you, because I know you can't like function. If you're low, I'll jump up and get a snack or a juice box. I just do what I can. Sometimes there's not much that I can do.
Right.
But I just make myself available.
Yeah. Yeah, you do a really good job at that. Because I think as somebody living with type 1, it's really hard to communicate that sometimes, or to feel like you never want to be a burden to somebody. So like me having high blood sugar, I never want to be like a burden for you in your day, or an extra layer of something that you have to think about. But you do a really great job at, or I feel like we almost have like a system too, not really a system, but like it's kind of like an unspoken thing where I can just show you my Dextom and you kind of know, like you just kind of get where I'm at. I don't have to explain it to you. And maybe that's just come from years of being together. But yeah, I feel like you do a really great job at validating just, okay. And you'll ask like, what do you need? And like, if it's where I just need to lay down for a few minutes, like you're really great at that. If, last night, I had a low blood sugar and I was simultaneously trying to get ready for the gym, trying to treat the low blood sugar, and trying to like get out the door. And I was like, I remember texting you, I was like, I have a low, I'm trying to leave. And you're like, okay, I'll feed the dogs. And that to me is just like, you understand that's not, there are certain parts of our day where it's not that I don't want to do them. It's just that I have a million other things simultaneously happening mentally, where like feeding the dogs, although it take 2 to 3 minutes, it's an extra layer, right? So you do a really great job at taking that burden away, I think.
I try.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, it's easy when I'm not stressed out myself.
Right.
Then there's days where we're both stressed out, and maybe I forget to ask you what you need, or it's not crossing my mind because I have my own things that I'm thinking about. And then you probably get frustrated because I'm frustrated.
We've definitely had that happen before, for sure. But I think that's a natural part of the process too, of just, like, again, I think it's about stepping into the other person's shoes. Like, you're usually really good at doing that for me, but also on another level, like, I have to do that with you too. And I have to remember that me and my diabetes isn't your everything, right? Like, you have you have work, you have 2 jobs, you are doing work throughout the day, you're caring for other things. So I think it is kind of that give and take of like, wow, this is an extra burden that I have, and yes, you're my partner and you support me in that. It can't always be your number one priority. And I think that's okay. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. It's just that extra layer of communication of, hey, can you support me right now? I think if I asked that, there'd probably be no hesitation. And just remembering that it might not be the first thing that comes to mind right then and there.
Right.
I say that now, and then... All right, so another question that I got was tips for wanting to support but not wanting to burden them. So I feel like this kind of goes both ways of like, what are some tips that you have for when you want to support me, but maybe you don't want to be the person asking, well, what's your blood sugar? Or like, do you have a juice box? Or like, those questions can, I think, be kind of triggering sometimes of, oh, well, you're cranky. Well, what's your blood sugar? At least, you don't do that. But
no.
So I guess, yeah, for you, what are ways that you try to support me without being like overwhelming?
Well, I'm not the one with diabetes, so I'm not going to, you know what to do when you have, a certain blood sugar, or you know how to treat it. I don't. So I'm not going to try to do it for you.
Right.
I'm just going to ask you what you need.
Right. Yeah. I think it goes back to that validation too of, okay, like, do you need support? Like, what can I do? Rather than,
you might not want suggestions or help.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a big one of like, validate, but don't try to solve it. Mm-hmm. Well, did you change your pump? Did you treat the low?
I mean, sometimes I do that.
Yeah.
Like, if it's a day where you can't figure it out, like some days your sugar's high and you've done everything, you've taken so much insulin and you barely eaten, you went on 2 walks and it's just not coming down, then I'm thinking, okay,
right,
this is not normal.
Yeah. Is
your pump leaking, or is the insulin bad? That happened like once or twice.
Yeah, it did.
Then I'll start doing that, and sometimes you don't like it. But also, I think, well, her sugar's been high all day. She's not thinking clearly either. So maybe she does need
an extra set of eyes.
I try not to do that all the time. It's just, I think part of me gets frustrated too, because it's like, all right, she's been 370 all day. Nothing's working. Now, we got to try other things.
Right. Yeah, I think that's fair. There's a difference between like troubleshooting and just like pointing fingers, which I think happens in a lot of, maybe not even like partnerships specifically, but even like parent-children dynamics of like, well, did you do this? Did you do this? And it's very like, whoa, okay, I'm making so many decisions at once. I don't need somebody just like rattling off solutions. But I think there is a difference between that and troubleshooting together, especially when all the other things haven't worked yet and you've supported me through all of those different things. It's like, okay, well, let's backtrack. What else could it be? And yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay.
Yeah. I think for me, yeah, like wanting, if I need support, but I don't want to overwhelm you with diabetes, because that's another thing too, right? There's always that, I think there's a layer of guilt sometimes when you're living with it, because it's like, this is a third wheel that you didn't ask for, right? Like this is another kind of like, not person, but another thing in our relationship that whether you asked for it or not, it came with me. It came with the package. It's almost...
It's something that most people don't have to deal with.
Right. You didn't ask for the dogs and you didn't ask for diabetes, but you got them. But yeah, I mean, if I want support by it, like, I don't want to make it every bit of our relationship. So I think just going back to those signals that I can send to you without having to make it like a big deal. And maybe you don't catch on to this, but I do. Like, I try to just, okay, show you my blood sugar instead of saying like explaining myself, because I feel like that's something that we do too. In every aspect of diabetes, we always have to advocate for ourselves. So like we're always advocating for ourselves to society, to our doctors, to insurance, which we know about that today. And you're somebody that I think I don't want to have to advocate for myself for. And I think that over the years, like, I haven't felt the need to, because I don't need to. Like, you get it. I don't need to explain it to you. So setting those like subtle hints of just saying, hey, I'm low, or showing you my Dexcom, or just saying like, I need to lay down. I don't know, I think that's, at least for me, a way that I can kind of acknowledge that this is something impacted me right now without needing to make it your entire situation. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I know you can't control it.
Right.
It's not something that you can control. It's you just have to deal with it. So what am I going to say if you say you need to lay down because your sugar is 371?
It's like a magic number. Just keep going to 370. No, I know. Okay. Has diabetes ever gotten in the way of your relationship?
I don't know if it's gotten in the way. Just maybe sometimes it complicates things. You know.
Can you think of a specific?
I mean, we have to think more about kids and big life decisions like that. It's just we have another thing to consider, and I think that makes it hard.
Yeah. It's never just a.
And with COVID.
Yeah, that was a big thing, and that was hard for you because you're a firefighter, so you're always, you know, midst in other people in your firehouse, and then also you're in a band, like you're a musician.
Yeah, both my jobs are very social, and I couldn't get away from being around people.
Right.
And that stressed you out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I can't help it. It's what I do.
Right.
I can't just not go to work.
Yeah. And there's so much unknown already in that time.
Yeah, plus everyone's opinion on both sides.
Right. Yeah, that wasn't the first thing that came to mind, but that was a huge one. And I remember kind of having conversations of like, it's like, well, we want to go to these social events, but there's this added thing to consider. Even
with taking the vaccine too.
Right.
Nobody knew how that would react with people with diabetes. Same thing with COVID.
Right.
We knew that people with diabetes were getting it more severe.
Right.
So.
Yeah, just another.
Definitely made it very difficult.
Right. It adds a lot of complexities to just everyday decisions, even as far as getting married. You know, like, you hate to think about it that way, but it's another thing to consider in, okay, insurance. There's another layer of, to me, this is something that I've always had to kind of battle a lot, especially between the diabetes and the Crohn's, but entering into marriage and saying like, okay, there's a certain level that these both have affected me so far. And that might be something that you understand, I understand, we've lived through together. But what about 10, 20, 30 years from now? You just never know. And I think as somebody living with these things, there is that other layer of guilt of, you know, not only does this affect me, but it affects my partner. It affects our future family. It affects, you know, like our separate families simultaneously. So yeah, I just think that like things that are everyday, you know, decisions or celebrations, it's never just as simple as getting to celebrate your love and get married. It's like another thing to think about on multiple different levels. I don't know.
Yeah, it sure is. But again, you didn't choose it, you know, it just happened to you. So like, I don't think you should feel guilty. You
feel that
you didn't
whether
ask for
you
it.
can, no. And logically you can say that.
Yeah.
But there's still, no matter what, again, there's that baggage.
Just anything can happen to anybody.
Yeah. It's like you being a firefighter. You're like, we've had those
conversations.
Right. So I agreed to that. But realistically, you haven't gotten hurt yet. So it's easy to say like, oh, this is fine. You know, it's just those things that pop up in your mind sometimes. Like this morning, for anybody listening, I had quite the conversation with the insurance company. And like even something as little as that of like trying to appeal a claim. Like that's energy that then you're pulling into your household and your relationship. And while it's not the biggest deal in the world, like yes, well tomorrow I'll look back and be like, that sucked. But it's still like it sucks. You know, it's okay to say that, I think.
Yeah, well, that was on top of a lot of other
A
things.
million other things. What is your least favorite thing about diabetes?
My least favorite? Oh, it can be very inconvenient.
Yeah.
It just gets in the way sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we go to my parents to eat, and your blood sugar's high, and we're having pasta. And you can't really eat because you have to wait for your sugar to come down. And, like, I get it, but other people don't really get it too much. And then you're worried about,
insulting your Italian
yeah,
mother.
You're worried about insulting somebody, or, and, you would never. But
aside from when she makes the seafood pasta.
but that just happens.
Yeah.
For you, like in any scenario. Or if we go out to eat, same thing. Like I remember my cousin's wedding in Philly. We were on the bus. We hadn't eaten anything, and there was all the traffic, and everyone was getting off the bus to walk, but we couldn't because your blood sugar was low.
Right. Yeah.
And you didn't. I think you ran out of juice, so we were just hoping to get to the venue.
Right. Yeah. So for some backstory on this, we had gone to his cousin's wedding in Philadelphia, and it happened to be like the weekend of a parade or something. So what should have been like a 10-minute drive down the block ended up being an hour and 45 minutes about.
Yeah, something like that. Like an hour and a half or something. So
probably stupidly, I took a pre-bolus because my blood sugar was already starting kind of high to try to make sure that, when we got to cocktail hour, I would have insulin going.
Right.
And not realizing that was going to be over an hour. And so, yeah, we at some point, all of your cousins kind of got off the bus and they're like, we're just going to walk. I'm like, well, if I walk, all of this insulin that is active is just going to make me plummet. So it's like, kind of, do you just sit on the bus waiting for waiting another half an hour or so? Or do I get out, get there quicker, but then my insulin's tanking? That was definitely a tough. Somehow I stayed at like 150. No, probably the stress.
Yeah, probably.
But I even think of, going to like birthday, I think it's a birthday party or 4th of July barbecue or something. And my blood sugar was just at like steady at like 230 at Dan's. And, even in situations like that, it's like friends that you don't get to see too often. And when my blood sugar is high for hours on end, you're like, let's go for a walk, which, did help. But at the same time, having to pull away from the experience, that's not always fair to like you in that instance. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So it's very inconvenient.
It is very inconvenient.
And it decides to be inconvenient at the worst times.
Yeah. You're not lying. But somehow we got through the road trip with like a solid. It didn't really.
Yeah, no, it was
get in the way of that.
It's pretty good.
Just weird. I was over prepared for that. All right, what is your best advice for a partner of a type 1, whether they're just starting to date or getting married?
Well, if they're just starting to date, I mean, definitely, if it's not something you're willing to put up with, then let them know.
Yeah, save them the time.
It's a lot. And it's okay if you don't want to put up with it.
Yeah.
But it's not fair if you don't tell the person that, because they have to. Right. And they got to know if you're going to help them with it or not. I would just say, again, just ask them what they need. That's all you can do. At the end of the day, you can't, solve it. It's not gonna just magically go away and there's no cure. So just help your partner deal with it as much as you can.
Yeah. I would 100% rather have somebody tell me up front, hey, this is not something I'm willing to be like have a part of my life. Just be upfront and fair, and that's, you know, okay, like one less person than I have to filter through, than have it like resented, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I do think it's also hard because a lot of people aren't aware of what, like I wasn't.
Right.
So it's tough to really understand
until you're in it
and you see all sides of it. You know.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite part about diabetes?
A favorite part? I mean, I like when you have to get cookies and stuff for low snacks. Because then I have an excuse to eat too.
Yeah. I just love when we're at your parents and they're like, all right, everybody good for dessert? I'm like, yeah, that's a separate stomach. And they're like, are you sure? Is your blood sugar okay? I'm like, yeah, we're good. Let's go. And then my best advice, I think, kind of going back on what we were saying before of, you know, validate, but don't solve. So again, kind of like what you do when I'm low or high. It's like, okay, what do you need? I never feel judged when my blood sugar is out of range with you. Like, I never feel like I have to explain myself or that you're like, oh, well, what happened? Like, what did you do? Like, you know, you kind of understand that this is just a natural flow of living with diabetes. And that to me is really reassuring.
Well, I know that you have a good handle on it. So I think that helps. Like, you're a coach for other people with this illness. So, like, I know that you know what to do, and I know that you know how to handle it day to day. But I don't know. What if you didn't? Like, what if you didn't have a good handle on it?
Yeah. How would that be different?
It might be different.
Yeah.
Because if I saw that you were neglecting it, I might speak up.
That's true. I mean, because at that point, especially when you're getting married, like, that does affect both of you.
Yeah, like if you're not on top of it, not taking care of it, and your health is getting worse because of that, that would affect me too.
Right. So yeah. It's definitely like a two-way. Like, if you can trust that I'm doing my best and I am paying attention to it, then yeah. It's not like so a lot of people have their partners like follow them on Dexcom Share or like follow. And I think at some point you did.
Well, I was just for like if you went low in the middle of the night.
Yeah. But now.
But I haven't been hooked up to it for
a few years.
A couple of years.
I think it helps now that we live together.
Yeah.
And it's so funny. Whenever my Dexcom goes off and I hear it, you never hear it.
But if you don't hear it, yeah.
You always hear it. It's kind of reassuring. I'm like, okay, at least if I don't hear this, I'm going to get a tap on the shoulder and be like, hey, you're low. It's nice. But yeah, I think like best advice to like somebody who is a partner is like validate, don't solve, you know. To somebody living with it who has a partner, try to let them into that experience. And again, I don't think you have to over explain yourself, but I think in certain circumstances, like I think there was one time that I got upset at you for not letting the dogs out before we went to bed, and you're like, oh no, they'll be fine until the morning. And in that instance, you might not have understood why I was upset at that, but I kind of tried to explain, and it took me a few minutes to try to put it into words, but I had to explain like, hey, if they don't go out now, they'll wake up earlier in the morning, and I generally don't get a lot of sleep, or I don't know what type of sleep I'll have because of my blood sugar. It can go high, it can go low. I'll wake up in the middle of the night. So like those few extra minutes of sleep really help me. And I think like letting you into that experience of why something that doesn't seem big had extra layers to it for me, I think that helped you. I hope. The next night you're like, I got it, I'm letting them out. You know, it was just kind of, to me it helped. So I think even when things aren't necessarily like a big deal, still communicating what that means to you. And I think if, you know, the right person will be understanding about it, you know. So it's easy to feel like a nag when you live, you know. like, oh, why didn't you do X, Y, and Z? But it's not really about letting the dogs out.
Right.
It's just taking away that extra layer of like mental space that otherwise comes with something I have to deal with no matter what.
Right.
Yeah. Any final words of wisdom?
I don't know. I think it's good to be aware of just how type 1 works and affects people. I know it's helped me with my job.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you have somebody that's not feeling well and people think they're having a heart attack or something, and I'm just like, oh no, their blood sugar's low.
Yeah, that happened to you a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I wasn't even working it. I was doing a gig, and somebody was at the bar, and somebody came up to me and said, hey, this guy's not feeling well, can you go up to him? And it took a while to figure out what was wrong, because he had been drinking, so I wasn't sure if he was feeling this way because he was drunk or because there was something wrong. And later he said, oh, I had blood taken earlier today and I haven't eaten since 1:00.
Right.
I was like, this guy has low blood sugar.
And you were able to get him those.
Got him some orange juice, and they gave him some juice, and he sat right up and started feeling better.
And you wouldn't have known that if it weren't for me. So, but it helped you with your EMT exam and everything too.
Did.
Like everybody in your class was like, "Why do you know so much about diabetes?" Like, oh. But no,
it's something that I just think about now, whereas most people probably wouldn't.
Yeah.
Because they don't have to.
Yeah.
Or they're not around it, so they don't see it or understand it. So it's definitely good to have that knowledge.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like when you buy a car and then all of a sudden you see it everywhere. You date a type 1 diabetic and all of a sudden there's not really. But yeah, thank you for having this conversation with me. I know that podcasting is not your cup of tea, but I think that you did great.
Thank you. You're welcome.